All right, everyone. I have the great pleasure and honor of speaking to attorney Alan J. Cannon about a really landmark, groundbreaking lawsuit. This endeavor, I can't do it justice by explaining a summary of it, so I'll get right into it. Alan, thank you so much for this interview.
I have to correct you. I'm not an attorney.
Oh, okay. Well, I want to just say thank you for this interview. Um, so, I guess in a summary for people, what is this about?
Okay, the name of the case is Laverne versus the U.S. House of Representatives. And what this case is about is the very first amendment to the Constitution. Originally, there were 12 amendments proposed. The Second Amendment was passed as the 23rd Amendment to the Constitution. But the very first seems to be buried. Now, the way it got buried was a transcriber's error, where the meeting was in New York because Philadelphia was not accessible because of what was going on at the time. So the the amendment had three parts to it. One was the first part was the guarantee that we started at a minimum um, for representation for the citizens of the United States. And at the time, the western part of the country was still owned by France and Spain. So nobody knew that we would expand to that far. The second part was an incremental change to the House of Representatives. And then the third part was in perpetuity. So what happened was when they agreed on these amendments, all 12 amendments went to the states for ratification. The states ratified them, but because technology was limited the way it was, they never reported back to Washington, D.C. So it was assumed that they didn't vote or that they didn't ratify the amendments. Part of the issue is that some of the government changed hands, or they created upper houses and lower houses. Each parts of those ratified them either congruently or separately. So we went on a treasure hunt to find this data. We had to go to each state that ratified the amendment and look in its archives because the records didn't exist in Washington, D.C. And you have to remember that the United States Archives was set fire to twice. So we go to these states, we find the documentation, we put it all together, and we wrote a book. The name of the book is called Less is More. And it describes how uh, one word makes a difference. The word more was substituted where the word less should have been. And
Can you
as a
explain that again? The word, what was the substitution of the word again?
the word more was substituted where the word less should have been. So it should have read no less than, which meant that the number could expand um, in in the future. So what people have to understand about this case is that the way that Congress was designed is that the House of Representatives belongs to us. And the very first thing that the founding fathers did before they made any other amendments was to ensure that our voice was part of the lawmaking process. By doing that, they designed Congress so that it would expand as our population expanded. Then they created the Senate, and the Senate is the state's voice. So the federal government gets its voice by presiding over Congress and the Oval Office. So you have the three-tier system of government, which had its built-in checks and balances, as the branches do. So when a person becomes a representative, they're supposed to represent constituents. A senator is supposed to represent the state's interests, and then the Oval Office represents the federal government's interests. And that's the way it was designed. It's brilliant, but it's no less brilliant than the Constitution itself, which this is a part of, which means that the 115th Congress has no constitutional right to make any law. The way the Constitution is written, the only law that they can pass is actually the budget. And that's because the budget is the only law that any municipality or any government has the obligation to pass. Every other piece of legislation is additional, it's preferential, it's abstract, it's based off what a certain need arises. But legally, the responsibility is just to pass the budget. And that's the only thing that they have to pass, which we see they're not even passing that on time. Now,
so right now there's 435 in the House and 100 in the Senate. How many? So what is the new number according to what should be in place?
It's roughly 6,236.
Oh, wow.
Roughly. And the thing is that
just in the House, or does the Senate change as well?
No, the Senate remains locked at 2 representatives per state because it's the state's voice, and all states are equal. The House is our House, which is according to the population, which the populations are not equal. Therefore, gerrymandering would be illegal under the system, and they knew that. The reason they made this amendment to the Constitution was to actually stop a power grab. The money grab was covered in the Second Amendment, which became the 23rd Amendment. So they looked at the possibility that our representatives could be corrupt. And that's why the representatives only have 2-year terms, so that you could get them out if they don't vote the way their constituents want them to vote. Mm-hmm. And the states have 4-year terms, so that you have the continuity of the government. So there's never a time where all the government can be emptied out at the same time. So the House of Representatives, it only takes 4 years to flip the House totally. And actually it only takes 2 years, because one half will be up 1 year and the other half will be up the other year. So it's actually 2 years. So when you limit the representation to 50,000 people, as the Constitution says it's supposed to be, okay, 50,000 people, that means that your neighbor is now your representative. That means places like Camden, Newark, Trenton, LA, all of these metropolitan cities would have 1 or 2, based off their population, representatives in the House.
Okay.
And here's the other fact. The other fact is that when the research was completed and the book was published, the book was sent to Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. 2 months ago, there was a talk about the book given at Princeton University. Oxford Law was in attendance, and they agreed as well. So that means that all of these talking points. And can we pause for 1 minute, because I want to give a moment of silence to the tragedy in Florida.
Absolutely.
Just pause for just a minute. We want the people in Florida to know that our prayers are with them. And the tragedy of this is that talking points and our desires as we express them become platform positions, which nothing ever gets done. When you look at the platforms of either party, it doesn't matter what the party is. The point is that there's no logical reason why women make less than men. No logical reason. Every person should make the same amount of money regardless of gender. There's no reason why affordable housing, real estate practices, banking laws, all of those things that people campaign on, they're still left undone because as we know, it's easier to bribe 435 than it is 6,000.
Now, can you explain who wrote the book, when it was written, where people can get it?
Okay, just hold on one moment. This is the book. Can you see it?
Yes.
The book is called How Less is More, the story of the First Amendment to the real First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It was written by Eugene Martin Laverne. He's one of the plaintiffs. His brother, Fred Laverne, is another one of the plaintiffs. There's Scott and Len Marshall, and Scott, I don't have his last name on the tip of my tongue right now. But it's just 5 of us as the plaintiffs. Now, this treasure hunt.
And Alan, you're one of the plaintiffs.
Yes, I am. Now, this treasure hunt came as a result of constitutional scholars being scoffed at that this amendment had actually been ratified. So it took us and our merry band of men to go to each state and find these documents. And in some cases, the person who was in charge of the archive didn't even know the documents existed. But here's the thing, okay. The United States Census exists to determine the number of members in the House of Representatives. That's why we have a census. And that's why we have it every 10 years, okay? Census takers all over the United States right now are being pushed to complete the 2020 census in 3 months. People don't know that. The reason why is because they know that this is real. So what they want to do is they want to get their hands on establishment candidates and have them primed and ready for this opening. So imagine if every corrupt politician you have on the local level makes it to the House of Representatives. Then you're still without a voice. But you only be without a voice for 2 years if you play your cards right, or if you wake up. But you don't think a person who votes your health care and he lives down the street from you is going to have a peaceful night, do you? That's the whole intent. The whole intent is to make your representation accessible to you. Now, how they go about hiding in Congress and never coming home and all of that stuff, oh, they're going to have to go home. With all of those members, they're going to have to go home. And we're going to have to restructure how they get paid. We're going to have to restructure their budgets. Everything, this is a game changer. And when people say, oh, that government would be too big to function, no, it's not too big to function, because we see every Sunday how people crowd into the stadium to watch people throw a ball around. We have national conventions all over the country every weekend. Somewhere, somebody's having a convention. So to put 6,000 people together, with today's technology, they don't even have to be in Washington. They can talk the same way we're talking right now. And their votes could be online for 72 hours. And if the constituents say change it, they better change it. Because if they don't, then they're going to be fine with dereliction of duty and breaking the oath of office. And we all know that breaking the oath of office is a legitimate charge in Congress.
So this relates directly to Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, right?
Yes.
And by your estimate, or by the book's estimate, over 6,000 representatives should be in the House instead of 435, correct?
Correct.
And that's amazing. So the argument is also based on the fact that when the Constitution was written, the 435 was indicative of the current population at that time?
No, it was upped. It started at 300.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. Sorry. So why did it not go past 435?
Because the people in Congress wouldn't let it go past 435.
And what year did that they cap it at 435? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head, no. But what I do know is that New Jersey actually lost 2 seats, even though our population was growing and we were already underrepresented.
So,
and keep in mind, this is not something we're pushing, something we made up. This is not something that we think. This is not a theory. This is actually the law. That's the thing about it. The same Constitution that empowers them to even be in office in the first place is what this is. They don't have a choice. This is the law. And they don't even have the power, according to the Constitution, they don't even have the power to redistrict the states. And let me add this. Any piece of legislation that the 115th Congress signed and passed on to the president, it's illegal. They don't have a quorum. They need at least 3,000 members to even send anything to the president's desk, which means it's impossible to impeach Donald Trump. Sorry to tell you, but that's the big takeaway. So everybody who's talking about impeachment, everybody who's talking about healthcare, no matter what side of the aisle they're on, they've all been served. They all know about this case. We had to serve not only every member of Congress, we had to serve the White House, the president, the vice president, the Secretary of Chamber of Commerce, and every seated legislator in every state.
And they all got served?
They all got served.
That's awesome.
So
what have you received any responses?
Yes, we've been in court since April. Since April of last year. We got into court. We got standing based off net neutrality. Now, we were the first case in the country to enter court based on net neutrality, but nobody said a word. The media wouldn't cover it. They act like it didn't exist. They all knew. So you have a person running for state legislator in New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Idaho, Iowa, wherever. Okay, if they were in office in April, they got served. But they didn't tell their constituents that, hey, this is a lawsuit, and what we need to do is pressure Congress to fix this before we pass any more laws that they could challenge. It's probably the main reason why Trump's Affordable Care Act didn't pass, because we amended our case to challenge that too. And we challenged in the tax bill. The point is, anything that they come up with, the 115th Congress, and you know why they call it a midterm, right? The reason they call it a midterm election is because it's still the 115th Congress, even though they added new members. So while we can't hold a previous Congress responsible for what they did, we're holding this current Congress responsible for what they're doing right now.
Do you have any congressmen or congresswomen on board with you?
No.
They don't want any change.
They have lawyers that we're fighting in court that are representing them. None of them will come out and say a word, because in their off time, they're making money for the DNC and the RNC. And the DCCC and whatever the Republicans Congressional Caucus people are, they won't give them a dime if they do that.
Yeah.
So I'm challenging Cory Booker and my assembly person. Well, she's my representative now, but she was my New Jersey assembly person, Bonnie Watson Coleman. I'm challenging them to a debate, but they won't even respond.
Hmm.
And the reason why they won't is because they know that I know. I've been I I've been on New Jersey politics for a while because I was elected official here in my hometown. So once I became deputy mayor here, then I had to worry about what the state was going to do to my municipality. Once I decided to delve into education and some of the major issues, then my understanding of what the federal government was doing started to rise. Once I got to that level, then I came back to my state and I said, well, if the federal government is doing this, why aren't you doing anything about it? And the issues were so paramount. I mean, Bill Clinton came here and stomped for my opponent.
Hmm.
Now she's in Congress.
Hmm.
There's a plethora of issues that are getting lip service, but you can't send 6,000 people to Congress and expect somebody not to come up with a good idea for immigration. It wouldn't happen. And then once they get on TV and they say they're whatever it is, you know, the media is probably going to try not to interview them or whatever, you know. But if they get their state people behind it, one state says, okay, this is what we're going to do. All right. And then the federal government has the answer, oh, that's illegal. You know, you can't make a sanctuary state. Okay, that's in violation. It may be. But what are you going to do about it? Really, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to arrest the governor? We have a governor in New Jersey who just provided sanctuary to a person that was almost in the custody of ICE itself. No charges on him, no federal charges on him. Aiding and abetting a felon.
Now, what are the chances that the Supreme Court sees this case?
Actually, here's what's gonna happen. Okay, there's a 3-judge panel, and the 3-judge panel should rule. Okay, if we lose, we can appeal. But if the government loses, it has no grounds for appeal. Because they're not injured in any way. We're using the Constitution. You can't appeal something that empowers you to be in office. No judge in his right mind would actually touch this. Not for the federal government to make an appeal. No, no. This is not about left, right, liberal, conservative. This is about the Constitution. What makes us citizens? What makes them be able to have say-so over what happens to us? This is the one document that is on the foundation, the bottom layer of this country.
So in Article 1, Section 2, you talked about an amendment to Article 1, Section 2 that, what was it about Article 1, Section 2 that you stated meant that 435 should be over 6,000?
Oh man, you're gonna make me look it up.
Because I think you mentioned it. You mentioned it while you were initially describing everything.
It was 3 parts. And most of this book is actually footnotes and documentation showing where each state ratified measure. I would rather be talking to you than trying to look this up.
I'll take your time. I mean, you mentioned something in the beginning regarding amendments.
Okay. Taken to extreme, the Constitution as proposed would actually allow Congress to apportion, in their discretion, 1 representative per state, irrespective of population. A state with a consensus population of 29,000, less than 30,000, would still be constitutionally entitled to 1 representative. Conversely, a state with a census population of 750,000 will also be apportioned one representative because the Constitution guarantees each state one representative irrespective of the census population, which was apportioned. And the ratio used, one representative for every 750,000 people, did not violate the constitutional rule if not less than one representative for every 30,000. Certainly, there can be no question that the ratio of one representative for every 750,000 people does not violate the constitutional rule, as it generally exceeds the ratio of one representative for every 30,000. But while this possible result would in theory be constitutional, would this possibility result be fair? And should this possible result ever be acceptable to the people? Should the people blindly trust future Congress? If left to their own discretion, future Congress could, in theory, let more than 100 years' time pass without increasing the size of the House of Representatives, which they did. And thereby, as population increased greatly, increasing the power of each individual representative by virtue of natural and expected increases in population way beyond that which was reasonably contemplated. It is noted that as of the year 2010, 100 years has passed since the size of the House of Representatives has been increased. So for 100 years, they didn't increase. That answers the other question. How long has it been allowed? Okay, they didn't increase it, which means now you have representatives who represent over 1 million people, which makes it totally against the purpose of the Constitution. Maybe I can if I'd have known you was going to do this, I would have this earmarked.
No. I mean, it's just you're doing great. I mean, this is absolutely fascinating.
The literal text of the Constitution, Article 1, used the word apportion rather than the word divided. And the collateral standard in the actual literal text did not read that the census population be divided by 30,000, but rather the number of representatives shall not exceed one for every 30,000. So it's plain in Article 1, it's plain that when they said they put the number of representatives, the number of people that the representatives could represent as a definite number.
No more than 30,000.
Right. That was the first one.
And now you have Congress people who are representing sometimes close to 1 million or over 1 million.
Right. Over 1 million. Yes. So the whole intention of Article the First, and that's, if you're going to look it up, you look up Article the First. All right, that's what you want to look up, and you'll see the three parts. The error, the transcription error. I could find that exact text. This is just absolutely crazy. And the fact that we were taught that there were only 10 amendments to the Constitution is really the travesty.
Well, you're right. I'm looking right now. The number of the seats in the House has not been increased in more than a century.
Right.
Even though every 10 years the census shows the population of the United States growing. So that's
Yes. Trying to find
But Alan, are you aware of the this is one article. The law was passed August 8th, 1911. So because of a federal law passed in 1911, it capped it at 435. Are you aware of that law?
Yes, we are. But that law was made overlooking Article the First's existence and its ratification. Thereby, that law was illegal. So you can't use the Constitution and put a cap in the Constitution while ignoring the previous edition of it, because the Constitution already made sure that there was no way that they could cap it. You can a person can argue all day and all night that the Senate should be capped, all right, but that makes all states equal. No matter if you cap the Senate at say you say one representative per state, or you say three as opposed to the two, and you say three because you don't want one person to just vote for the entire state. You want there to be a debate. You want there to be an odd number. You know what I'm saying? That would make sense. But we know in today's world, the state is usually going to go the way that the federal government goes. So you don't need a third person. They're going to join forces anyway. And the expectation of that is that we have the House. The House belongs to us. The House belongs to the people. So that's why pieces of legislation have to agree from the House and the Senate to make it to the president's desk.
Now, wouldn't you need the Supreme Court, though, to help you out with that that law in 1911 that was passed to cap it at 435?
Well, we don't need the Supreme Court. We have a 3-judge panel, and if the 3-judge panel looks at the evidence and rules on the evidence in our favor, then that's it. It's just that simple. The Supreme Court doesn't even have to look at it. They don't even have to see it.
Now, when will that ruling?
The problem is that the Supreme Court, they interpret law. They don't make law. So that would be the other issue, is that how are they going to interpret the fact that this is what the Constitution says? We proved in the documentation that we have the number of states that we need to ratify this. And the paperwork has been carbon dated. We have original documents that have been carbon dated and with signatures. The same signatures that you see on the Constitution are on some of these documents.
Wow.
So the point is that you can't sit there and say, well, you could. I mean, we do have Citizens United, a ruling that made bribery legal. Okay, they could say it. But up until now, every major protest, the Women's March, the Million Man March, the Million Women's March, the anti-Trump marches, the anti-Clinton marches, they all lacked one component. And that component was economical impact. So what happens if everybody who knows about this case refuses to pay their taxes because they don't have representation? What, you're going to lock us all up? You're just going to expand ICE and just make militarized zones? Or you just going to get a bunch of police cars and put Taco Bell stickers and CNN stickers on them and militarized companies? See, here's the problem. The problem is that the DNC went into court and said that it was their right to cheat because they were a private organization. But you don't have a nominee that KFC nominated and said this is their candidate. You don't have a Walmart nominee. Okay, you don't have a RCA or a Sony or an Apple nominee. You have a DNC nominee that used federal and state money
to
rig an election, which violates every election law in every state. And Congress didn't say a word. Yeah. So who got defrauded? Every single taxpayer, not just the Democrats who got booted off the rolls and was expected to come back, not just the people who wanted to support Bernie, but every single taxpayer in the entire United States got defrauded because dollars don't have D or R on it. So you use independent tax dollars to hold a primary because they pay their state taxes and they pay their federal taxes. So you use the independents' dollars and they don't even get a primary to rig a primary and then say it's your right to rig it. And then the people sworn, hand on the Bible, sworn to uphold the Constitution and follow the laws of the United States, don't say anything. But they open an official investigation on how much air is in a football for the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And then, to compound that, the people who swear to abide by the law and hold the Constitution open up investigations on their opponents using tax dollars for a political agenda when the Constitution says that the race is supposed to be fair. The Constitution guarantees our right to vote. It guarantees that the vote's supposed to be counted the right way. Anytime there's an election and there's a federal candidate on the ballot, it becomes a felony automatically. Automatically. We still have a case in New Jersey where I was on the ballot for Congress and we're still suing them.
What happened with that?
According to New Jersey Constitution, okay, if a candidate or a party gets column 1 and column 2, for them to have those columns legitimately, they have to have a certain number of voters, and that number is derived by the previous general election. So the previous general election sets a number. The number is held against the number of participants in the primary, and then in the general election, it determines whether or not they qualify for column 1 and column 2. And they've been cheating for decades. Because when you have if you have a contentious primary, then chances are you're going to get column 1 and column 2. Like when Obama ran. Okay. People showed up for the primary. But now we know that the primary is rigged. So how did you validate a rigged primary when somebody already, the day before the primary comes out and says, this person already won? You remember that? You remember that? So the point is, if you can't validate a primary, then you can't validate an election because you can't validate the opponent. That we don't know if the other side cheated or not, but we know the other side went into court and confessed to cheating. So there's no such thing as a half-rigged election.
So let's say Cory Booker said, you know what, I'm gonna debate Alan J. Cannon. And during the debate, he says to you, well, you know, Alan, all of this was decided in that 1911 federal law, and they capped it at 435. So there's nothing we can do. What would be your response?
I would say, first of all, Senator, you should already know what real representation is. You wasn't representing the citizens of Newark when you took $100 million out of their educational system. So we don't have to go back to 1910 to figure out where your character is. But if you want to go there, then the 1910 law was written in absence of the actual Constitution that was already ratified, which we proved and scholars agree. Any more questions, sir?
And so, but then if they say, well, I guess the question would be, how do you invalidate a law, even if the Constitution makes it invalid without the Supreme Court?
I guess because I'm not a lawyer, but what I do know is that, say the question was DACA, because that's a more recent example. Okay. DACA was a violation of the Constitution because the president does not have power over immigration. The Constitution explicitly says that the House and the Senate handle immigration. Explicitly says that. Okay. So how does Congress let that pass? They're supposed to be the checks and balances of the government. So you sit there and you say nothing when the president tries to pass a piece of legislation by executive order that violates the Constitution and is in direct conflict with the power that you will to protect the people. So DACA would have to be repealed. But as I spoke to a friend who we were having this conversation, I said, if you can hide pork in any bill that you want, then you can plainly display the answer to any problem in the same bill that you use to repeal it. So this whole thing about, oh, we got to come up with an immigration plan, and then, first of all, you didn't enforce the immigration laws that were in place. Second of all, you have a Secretary of State who sold immigration to get people to the head of the line. And you didn't say anything about that. But the average person, they could spend, I think it's $750 to file your immigration papers. And immigration has even adapted so that they take credit cards. So if you don't have the money up front, you could put it on a credit card. But you use the same credit card to pay your bills, buy clothes for your family, eat, but you wouldn't put $750 on a credit card to make sure that your family doesn't get broken up. See, when you put this in perspective, okay, most good parents, they do things to make sure that their legacy and kids are safe. That's why they work. You know, put a roof over their head, send them to the best schools as within their means. You know, that's why they do these things. So to build a life for 17 years and not protect it, but you get car insurance, you got house insurance, why didn't you pay for your papers and get future insurance? I don't have a problem with anyone coming to this country. The people who come here should know that what our laws are, and our laws should be enforced. But if you're a drug dealer and you get a mansion on the hill and your kids go to the best schools and you live that split life, when they catch you, they take everything. So somebody said, well, you can't steal citizenship. Oh, I beg to differ. You can access anything. You could steal anything. People steal people's hearts. People steal people's minds. I'm quite sure you could steal citizenship too.
And let me ask you a question. Being from New Jersey, are people aware that Senator Cory Booker, and this was in Politico, this is documented, that Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump raised money for Senator Booker? Did you know this?
There's no limit to the amount of people that Trump raised money for. If that was a Democrat, then he raised money for him. He helped them for decades. So, I mean, the fact that he's a Republican should show you that there's something wrong with our system. There's all these nonprofit organizations who rant and rave about taking money out of politics. But where are they at when we need help getting this case out? Where are they? I mean, if Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, Paul Ryan, all of them are defendants on this case. Okay? And it doesn't matter whether or not you like them because of they stand on that side or they stand on the other side. That doesn't matter. The point is what empowers them to be there. Even if you support them, love them, or hate them. This court case is the same thing that empowers them to be there. It's the Constitution. The fact that we even have to go through the hurdles. I could be all day another show about the hurdles, but you'll talk to some of the other guys and they'll tell you, okay, the fact of the number of defendants we had to serve. And I'm gonna tell you one quick story. Paul Ryan refused service as Speaker of the House.
How did you do that?
He was the only one whose packet came back. Now, to get the packet to him, it had to go through security. It had to be opened. They had to scan it. They had to check it, make sure it wasn't no white powder or anything. Because he's the Speaker of the House. But he thought we were so stupid that we wouldn't serve him in his own state.
Oh, you served him initially in the Capitol build in DC.
In his home state, and we served him in Congress, and we served him again as Speaker of the House. He got served 3 times.
That's awesome. So he didn't send it back 3 times, right? Only once.
No, he sent back the one that was gave to him as Speaker of the House.
That's great.
Now here's the thing. The legal objection of somebody saying, "Oh, I didn't get served." It's such a minor thing, and when I say minor, I mean in the terms of how we get treated by the law. Because when there's a warrant out for our arrest, we could be driving and don't even know that the warrant is there, but we get picked up. So the point is that you're a seated member of Congress. You're the Speaker of the House. You're the voice of the Constitution. And you try to deny service? You have to remember that in the DNC case, the server was killed or died mysteriously.
Sean Lucas.
Sean Lucas, and the DNC's first action was, we move on dismissal because we weren't properly served. Because he knew the server was dead. He died the night before he was supposed to testify. But what they didn't know is that he Facebook Live the service. So they killed the man for nothing. He had 1 million witnesses. But you can't talk to people who are so so steeped and so grounded in these partisan politics about what's right and what's wrong. 25 years in the military, I handled some pretty strange documents. All right. But one of them could have sent me to jail. Any one of those documents could have sent me to jail. If somebody asked for the document and I couldn't produce it, I deleted it. You'd have never heard my name.
Yep.
My family would have probably been told I just died in combat or something, or I was just missing in action.
And if you destroyed 30,000 of them,
There's no way I could get my hands on 30,000 of them. And here's the thing. Okay, when you talk about SIPR and NIPRNet, okay, and the penalty for moving documents from those systems, one document, there's no way that any person who understands that could ever vote for Hillary.
Now, Alan, do you think Clinton took a picture or had somebody take pictures of the screen from the JWICs or SIPRNet or a thumb drive? How did she manually remove those things? That is the top secret intelligence.
She had her server connected to it. She just forwarded it, and nobody said anything.
Okay.
There's no way that once anything went to her BlackBerry, it could have ended up at Toys R Us.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just the truth.
Yeah.
and for 33 devices to be destroyed with a hammer, everybody who's ever held a government device knows that you turn the device in. You don't have the right, the legal grounds. That's a charge in itself, destroying government property, because it still belongs to the government and it's supposed to be turned in, repurposed for the next person who used that office. And it's supposed to be wiped, professionally wiped, not bleach out. It's just, there's so much going on that we could talk for hours and none of this would make sense. But the point is that our case proves beyond a shadow of a doubt, and people need to understand this, that the House of Representatives belongs to us. And it has been held from us for over 100 years. That's like somebody not getting the word that slavery was over, and they still down south picking cotton. And people are yelling, hey, slavery's over. No, it ain't, boss. You trying to get me in trouble. That's what this is. This is the word being late to the American people. It's not a new law. It's just the word being late to the American people. That's what it is.
And also, like you're saying, I mean, 6,000 representatives, the lobbyists wouldn't know what to do.
It breaks the lobbyist system.
It breaks the system.
And the system that it breaks should never existed in the first place. You remember Obama's promise to get lobbyists out of Washington? I remember. I remember that. But he didn't say anything to the lobbyists who lobbied him to raise the cost of EpiPens after making them mandatory in every school.
Yeah.
He didn't say, get out of my office to that lobbyist whose father is a congressman.
And if you have 6,000, or if you have a proportionate representation in the House, there's just too many. There's just too many representatives for lobbyists to target.
Right. And then the people who are not being targeted, they'll tell on the people who are. That's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
The checks and balances. It's like, I'm not telling on you because you didn't offer me any money. I'm telling on you because you offered anybody money.
Yeah.
That's the way it's supposed to be. There should be never anything about a dirty cop, because cops are not supposed to abide by behavior that makes a dirty cop. So when you look at, there are good officers and there are good agents in these agencies, but their hands are tied. When you see it on TV all the time, a federal agent shows up on a local crime scene and says, I got this. What is local law enforcement going to do but back down? They don't have a choice. Because the governor's office is going to call him and say, did he say back down? How many warnings do you need? And then the way they treat whistleblowers.
Oh my God.
You know.
Well, Jeffrey Sterling is finally out of jail. I mean, that was a travesty.
And this whole Assange thing.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah.
When you find out the truth, the source doesn't matter. The source might make the truth a little bit harder to believe, but it doesn't change the fact that it's the truth. You know, every day you see kids in a crossing walk, all right, and you see a crossing guard stopping traffic and letting those kids come. But if the crossing guard is not paying attention and the child says, "A car is coming," they're not stopping. Are you going to listen to the kid, or are you going to listen to the traffic guard who's not paying attention? Oh, you'll want the traffic guard's job after a kid gets hurt. But clear up to that, what do? This, the thing is that members of Congress right now know that any piece of legislation that they put on the president's desk can be challenged. They know it because their lawyer is sitting in front of us in court. They know it. They are fully aware of it. And the fact that not one of them even has the conscience to say, hold up, wait a minute, let's settle this first. No, we're going to spend millions of dollars on investigations that are not going to lead anywhere because we all need to be millionaires before we leave office.
Yeah. And they become very wealthy, lobbying, I guess, working for the same people who tried to lobby them when they were in Congress.
That is the value of being a congressman. A lot of people go to Congress for one term so they could get on the floor as a lobbyist.
Yeah.
That's the whole game. I mean, access. Look how much money people paid Clinton for access to Clinton.
Oh my God.
That's the golden ticket, the access. And when you think about it, oh man, okay. Access doesn't necessarily mean bigger and better. Access just means the ability to obtain. So when you break it down to the level of what's going on in public education, okay, all kids are not being provided the same access, the same level of exposure, and some of them in their lives may never get the exposure as other adults because they were denied it in the very beginning. On Twitter, I got followed today by Hotel.com. And I explained, I said, what this case is about. We got standing in court based off net neutrality. So if, say, the major hotels lobby to members of Congress to shut hotelbooking.com down, they control the internet, net neutrality. They could just pull all their ads or put their ads, throttle their ads down, still charging them money, but nobody's seeing it, and they don't even know nobody's seeing their ads. And they'll still be paying the same rate. So anybody who has a business that thrives on the internet and the exposure should have been paying attention to net neutrality. But anybody who says they're fighting for net neutrality should be following this case, because this was the first net neutrality case. Because to get standing, we had to find an issue that impacted all Americans. And net neutrality was that issue for us. Because now we have cell phones, we have companies selling your information, we got cable companies, we got purchasing outlets. We got all of these outlets that are using the internet to gather data. And if net neutrality goes through, then only the the biggest proponents of that industry will be able to have access to that data, which will drive the smaller people out of business. So Amazon would become king easily. Why? Because he's got access to Microsoft. And Microsoft has access to Apple. And now shows like yours, Tim Black. Hey, what's up, Tim Black?
I love Tim Black. We were actually, I was speaking to Tim the other night on the phone about you, and both of us have such a tremendous amount of respect for everything you're doing, Alan. It's just that this has been an amazing interview. But yeah, I mean, I know that you were on Tim Black last week, right?
Yes, yes. And Tim was sitting there with like, I think his mind was a little bit blown. But
my mind is blown too. My God, I mean, it's kind of, you know what? One thing I love about what you're doing, it's like you are in a very good way blowing up the system, and the paradigm, you are breaking and shattering the paradigm of thought to where, oh my God, even Congress is, effed up. Even Congress is not doing what the Constitution and Founding Fathers wanted it to do.
Well, I'm not the only one. There's 5 other plaintiffs, like I said, and these guys are. It's such an amazing group of guys. I mean, I can't wait for you to interview the rest of them, because
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Scholars. One guy is, I guess he's like the lead constitutional lawyer authority in the country. And the things that these guys have been put through because of this case, I mean, they say, you don't necessarily have to die to suffer. These guys live room for that.
Well, listen, I wanna definitely revisit this. Let's keep in touch within this week. Let's set up a time with Google Hangout. I mean, this show is not, I'm not technologically savvy, but all you have to do is just send them the links and they'll pop up here, and we can have, do
you have, do you use Zoom?
I've used it before, but we'll definitely talk about the best ways to do it. But I would love to have you and the others, or as many of the plaintiffs as possible on this show back again. And I mean, I want to talk forever. I mean, this has been an absolutely fascinating interview. I want to ask, I don't usually ask this, but I want to ask everyone watching right now to do me a favor on every social media platform possible. This interview with Alan J. Cannon, get this viral, get this going on every social media platform you have, because I mean, everything that is important to you, like you said, Alan, left or right, pertains to this lawsuit.
I had a person who designs fashion, and it occurred to me that if they were contacting me online, then they were probably a small designer, people who sell artwork. All of these different outlets that are creative, they let people feel valued. They let people appreciate life. I mean, we have colors, and we have portraits, and we have statues, and we have all of these things that creative people embrace, and they present to us. They enrich our lives by being in the position to have that creative vision. And those things go away with net neutrality. Those things go away with laws. Those things go away with corruption. And the best things in life usually end up getting hoarded by those people at the top. Like in Korea, if Korea's a place where they don't sell alcohol, you can best believe they're celebrating in the palace with some alcohol. We've seen time and time in history where the elite have the best of everything while the people are scrounging. And this amendment to the Constitution actually prevents that. You know, it stops the power grab. It stops the money grab. It's what we need right now, and it might be our last hope to save America.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for this discussion. I could talk forever with you. I mean, there's just I definitely see eye to eye with you on so much.
You could just call me. So, you know.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for this interview. I look forward to discussing this more with you. Please come back when there are some new updates that you want everybody to know. Everybody watching, how can they get a hold of you, and how can they find out more about everything you're doing?
The easiest way is to go to my Twitter page. It's AJC, the number 4, the word others. My pinned tweet has the links to the book and to the case. They could go to John Laverne's page, Frederick Laverne's page. They could look up Eugene Martin Laverne. They could look up the case itself directly. The case is called Laverne versus U.S. House of Representatives. If you Google me, then you'll find my Twitter account, and the pinned post is right there. I'll be trying to share this video and the interview with Tim Black in as many places as possible. That's what I spend a lot of my time doing. The major hurdles for the case, we have another milestone in March because they delayed the case because of the government shutdown. So 3 days of government shutdown gave them another month to try to come up with something to fight this case. But all their major objections have all been squashed. So.
Well, Alan, thank you so much. And it's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Okay. Maybe sometime next week we'll get together.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.